Hey everybody, welcome to Soundbalming. I created this show for people who want to experience a radical, life-changing journey through the sounds of my diverse guests. I hope that each sound you hear on this show will strengthen your faith, encourage your dreams, and challenge you to awaken the greatness within you.
Drop the bomb. Drop the bomb. We're gonna drop the bomb. Drop the bomb. We're gonna drop the bomb. Drop the bomb. We come to drop the bomb. Drop the bomb. Open the bomb.
This is a journey into sound. A journey which along the way will bring to you new color, new dimension, new values, and a new experience.
Ladies and gentlemen, the star of the show,
Lamarr, Darnell Shields.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever the time of the day it is. You're at the right place at the right time with the right person. Welcome to my show. I'm your host, Dr. Lamarr Darnell Shields, in the building. And I'm always in the building because we have a pandemic out there. So I need to stay in the building. Well, I wasn't in the building. I just came back from Wisconsin. Shout out to all the amazing teachers in Wisconsin, in particular the city of Beloit, Wisconsin. I'm working with some amazing teachers and administrators out there. So shout out to all those amazing teachers who are working so hard to deal with all the personal challenges. Hey, speaking of challenges, my goal with this show is to introduce you to people with the ideas. I love that, with the ideas that will help you unlock your full potential. Now, on this show, I've talked about so many different things. I've had so many amazing people. I got some amazing people in my Rolodex. Now, I know people don't probably know what the hell a Rolodex is, but for my people who are somewhat younger, a Rolodex is an electronic, a paper document of an electronic document that we sort of changed the name to or something like that. But you all know what I'm talking about. Just Google it. I don't have a whole bunch of time to talk to y'all about what a Rolodex is, but I got a lot of people in my phone book. And some amazing people get a chance to sit down with me. And we talk about some serious, some fun, funny, but also some challenging topics. And today is going to be one of those fun, funny, challenging. We're going to give you some things that you can do as always. And if you don't know, many people have not had an ideal childhood and have experienced traumatic events in their early life. So if you've experienced childhood trauma or sexual abuse or any type of trauma, the big T or the small t, you are not alone. Your psychological trauma is real and your feelings are valid. And my next guest is no stranger to this topic. You see, prior to her extensive film and TV credit, she fought through a troubled childhood to get on the road towards some amazing experiences thanks to her acting career. She was featured in major Hollywood productions, including City Slickers, Dante's Peak, and Solar Force, as well as U.S. and international TV shows, including Star Trek, The Next Generation, 90210, and Die Gang, The Waterfront, just to name a few. But in March 2020, she released her first book, Awaken. I love the title, Discovering Yourself Through the Light, Your Innocence, a memoir sharing how refusing to be broken by the environment of her youth and choosing to leave her childhood home at the age of 15 and later becoming an emancipated minor at 16. Let me just tell you, I wasn't trying to leave my mama house at all, but she's going to tell us what she did. Who am I talking about? I would like to welcome Walker Brandt to Soundbalming. Welcome to the show. How are you doing today? And you got to let our listeners know where you are calling in from.
Hi, Lamarr. I'm great. Wow, what a great introduction. That was lovely. Thank you. I am in Southern California. It is, I think, almost 90 degrees here today.
So are you just saying that to rub that in? Because in the green room prior to the show, I told I just came from Chicago, Wisconsin. I have on this long, first of all, I had on a turtleneck, but the studio lights would burn the heck out of me. I was supposed to be in California, but because of your governor and some other things that are going on in the school district, I won't get into it because I want to stay happy because you got the Super Bowl coming to your beautiful state. But because some unforeseen things happened, I went to Wisconsin. Now, no disrespect to the Wisconsin folks, because I love Wisconsin. But if I had a choice to go to sunny California and cold Wisconsin, I would have chosen California. And we probably could have done this interview together, maybe with some face masks and maybe about 10 feet apart. But welcome to my studio. It is a joy. I am excited to hang out with you today because my producer sent me all the amazing things you do. Listen, I know I talked about Rolodex. Some young folks don't know what the hell I'm talking about. Listen, I don't have time to explain to you what a Rolodex is, okay? I can't even bring a Rolodex to 2022. What would a Rolodex be in 2022? Instagram, Facebook, TikTok? What would it be?
It'd be your contacts, and it would need to have Bluetooth accessibility, and there'd be a real cool like spinning effect to it. Remember how it was
that was a cool thing. I really didn't have one. I couldn't afford one. I was not the CEO at the time, but now I'm the CEO and I can afford some other things. So, you know, I told so many people I was going to have you on the show. I got so many Star Trek fans and so many 90210 and Dante's Peaks. We're going to talk a little bit about that, but we're going to talk about some trauma. We're going to talk about your amazing book. I got a chance to read some of the excerpts. Typically, the producer somehow gets books in my hands, but she didn't get your book in my hand. But still, you know, I'm sharp enough to pull some good things out of there. So I want to talk to you before we get into trauma, because trauma is so heavy. I want to start off on this. When did you fall in love with stage? And then how did you go from the stage? How did you go from the stage to then writing books and then talking about energy and talking about awakening and talking about engaging? And how did you go from that to what you're doing right now?
Well, I discovered at a really young age that this is our stage. And it was in nature. One of the things I used to do as a kid to recover from the environment I grew up in was escape out into nature. And in nature, my imagination just exploded. It was a way of self-soothing and comforting myself. And there was always so much around me. When you go out in nature, there's just so much opportunity surrounding you. There's so much to engage your imagination. And as children, we tend to not edit. We tend to just play. And that's what I would do. I'm just a very playful natured person. And so that's when I first started seeing myself on a stage. I didn't realize that until I was as an actor, and so much came naturally to me. And I haven't had any training in this. This is not what I wanted to do. I never thought about being an actor, but I was natural at it because I had been redesigning, reinventing, recreating my life as a kid to heal through what I had just been through. I was determined to find joy. I was determined to find laughter. I was determined, just a determined kid. And I had a lot of resilience. So that's where I first discovered it. And then I would do little shows. My cousin and I would do little shows for our great aunties. And we'd go in their closet and we'd raid their clothes and we'd put on their wardrobes and come out at family gatherings and just, improvise these funny little, but I didn't know what acting was. Nobody in my family was an actor. Nobody in my family really gave themselves that kind of choice to express their innocence, to express that playfulness. It was a very serious environment, as you mentioned, with a lot of dysfunction and trauma. And so there was something inside of me, a light in me that just refused to put that on, and always was drawn to play, drawn to speak up, drawn to say no and yes to something else. Mm-hmm. And so, I just resisted it. And so then I left home, as you mentioned, I left home and I was approached by a photographer, poor guy, approaching a 16-year-old runaway and saying, I want to take pictures of you with the toughness I had developed out of self-preservation. It was not the easiest thing for this guy. Let's just put it that way. I just looked at him. I thought he was a creeper. And I told him so. And I just said, get away from me. No. And the people that had taken me in, I was very blessed to have met a boy through my friend who came and got me and drove me to Los Angeles in the middle of the night when I decided I was going to leave home. Her name was Francine Cohen, and we went to a school together. When I was in productive custody, and I went to a school from a halfway house because I wouldn't go home. So I went to the school for a year, and I met a lot of kids that were high risk, like me. Everybody there was high risk. There were quite a few from Los Angeles, and she was from LA, and she had been in some really high risk situations herself. She came from a rough family. She was in gangs, and her parents were trying to help her, trying to save her. And I called her in the middle of the night, and I said, I got to get out of here. She knew what I'd lived through. She was in the same school as me. We were all in counseling, and we were all, it was an intense situation. Just put it that way.
So what was inside of you where, and we hear this word resilience a lot, where you knew that you had to leave where you were, but I'm sure that there was some level of fear that was somewhere walking side by side as you decided to walk out of your parents' house. And then what was inside of you that you then took that to the stage? Because again, you're talking about pushing something down. You know, my daughter, as you were talking, today is the big day for my daughter's show that she is starring in today. It's a musical. And I'm so excited about it. And as you were talking, I was thinking about both of my daughters who are artists, and my son is an artist, but I couldn't imagine them leaving our house. Her mom is an actress. I'm an artist. I couldn't imagine them walking out of our house and then going somewhere else and then taking whatever that it was onto the stage and then becoming this famous actor. It actually sounds like a movie or a play itself. What was inside of you that said that this was okay and that this was going to be all right?
When I knew that there had to be, just like when I went out in nature as a young child, I knew that what was out there was going to be better than where I was. I knew it. The level of fear I lived with in my home was way bigger than anything I believed was waiting out in the world for me. It was my belief. It's what I experienced when I was in nature. I knew, I felt comforted. My connection with God, I just knew. I felt connected with all of creation in nature. I felt like, okay, I can really speak to my ultimate parent here. I am being carried. I am being protected. I knew it. I just knew it in my gut. And so, yes, of course, fear. But like I said, it was less than what I was going through. It was unknown, and the unknown was conditioned by what I had inside of me from what I experienced in the unknown, which was always grace. It was always protection. I just wasn't afraid in the unknown of nature. That's how I saw the world outside of my family, is I thought, okay, it's just not as scary out here as it is there. And that's why. And it was my perspective. Same thing with acting and being on the stage. It was the way I perceived it. I perceived it as something fun and adventure, and a place for me to learn and to grow and to experience something new. And I knew enough that the way I perceived it had an impact on what I received.
So when you approach the roles that you get, and you've played in many, groundbreaking projects that we all know: Dante's Peak, City Slickers, Next Generation. Just to name a few, tons of commercials. I looked at your commercials. So how does one who's dealing with so much trauma in their life, this somewhat unresolved trauma, when in my other life, I worked for Johns Hopkins Center for Violence Prevention. So I dealt with a whole bunch of trauma, being around researchers. How does one then stuff that down and then take on a role that's the total opposite of where you came from? Because my daughter is an actress. I love my youngest daughter, Samira, who was very shy. But I got her into center stage acting camp, and she just explodes. on stage. I mean, this is the child who, when I'm driving her to school, she attends a boarding school where she's listening to show tunes in the car. I'm like, no, we about to listen to some Tupac today, or some Barry Manilow, or some Diana Ross, or some Beyonce. No, we're gonna listen to some show tunes today, Dad. But so how does one who comes from an unstable environment like you do, then able to show up at a Payless commercial, or one of the jewelry commercials that you did, or a food commercial, or anything that you're doing?
Well, it's being willing to play. It's being willing to not just live in the trauma. And that's what I never stopped doing the work on myself. If you read Awaken, that's the theme, is that there were lots of trips and stumbles. There were lots of moments where I felt like I wasn't in control of my own identity, because I've become so invested in the character or the work, the craft, which is such a beautiful craft. It's when you take on a character and you develop a character and you do it within the structure of the craft of acting, it's so nuanced and so beautifully delicate and defined and intricate that it gives you an escape. It gives you a journey into a life that is in some ways very healing. So I felt like I was developing who I was within it, and it became part of the building of my life, of who I was, of what. And there was a point where I realized, okay, wait a minute, this could be dangerous for me, because I could just go into these characters, and then when I come out back into my life and who what I have to deal with, this is really painful. The separation, the reality of what I do have to deal with and what I do have to acknowledge is me. So there was, as you say, an element. There were times, especially in my 20s, in my youth, when I didn't have the capacity to fully understand, but did have the faith to ask God, please guide me, keep me playing, that I would stand in recognition that I don't have everything to manage this the best possible way. So I started to pull away from film and TV. Because of that, I was afraid at one point that I would become a statistic. Everybody in my family has drug and alcohol problems and substance abuse problems to manage their trauma. Just there's very few that have not gone down that road. And in fact, I really don't know if there is anyone that I know of that hasn't gone that road except for me. I've not used and I'm not saying that in any way to be self-aggrandizing. It's just a choice. And that's what life is, as you know.
I agree. Many of my family members was really involved in alcoholism. My uncles, my mother was not. And so I'm one who, I've been a vegan since 93, don't take alcohol, drink, or anything like that. And I'm not just celebrating that. It's just a part of who I am, but it was a choice that I actually made. So I definitely applaud you on that, because I'm like you, I've seen so many of my family members sort of fall apart to some level of addiction to hide and to escape. What I like that you said, that was very transparent. You said, I could have easily gone down this road because I was creating these characters and being someone else. And as you were talking about that, I was thinking of, do you remember Andy Kaufman, who played Laka on Taxi? And do you remember this whole thing where he took on all of these roles? Like, you didn't know, we didn't know who he was. He would be on these TV shows and he would show up as Laka. He didn't know how to cut it off. And then I think, he faked his death in 1984 and did some really, really strange things. Because you're in a world of actors, you're in a world where people are good at lying, as one producer, as one director says, I tell lies. What message do you have for individuals who are not actors or actresses, on stage, but we all are playing some type of role. When they get so caught up in these voices, when they get so caught, and I'm not talking about schizophrenia or any mental health issue, when they get caught up in all these other voices that tell them other than who they are, and they instead of being their true authentic self, they show up as someone else, as someone who's a classically trained actor, who's done this work, who's dealt with trauma, who's going through your stuff. What message do you have for a person who somewhat gets lost in the stories that other people have told about them?
That there is no story more important to humanity and you above all than your own. There just isn't. Your story is where your story is where all those stories you're attracted to informs those stories. Your story is what you bring and makes you unique. What happened with me, the points where I started recognizing, I don't think I've ever even mentioned this, is I began or spoken of this out loud outside my family. There was a point where I cared too much about what other people thought because of being so concerned about the perception of my story, what others may think of my story, because of keeping it under wraps to a large degree, like you said, putting it aside so that I could go and deliver what was being asked of me as a performer. It was informing who I was, and it was definitely part of why I was attractive to people, because there was the interest, who is this person and all this energy. It's part of who I am. But I wasn't completely in honor of it being a part of who I am. I made the choice to say, I don't want to be this like I've seen, because I've recognized that those choices others have made, their life is a result of our choices. Their lives were something I did not want to experience. I wanted to experience something else. And there was something that I saw in my grandmother's eyes as a young child. I lost her when I was 3, and I was one of those kids. I remember when I'm 3. I remember when I was 2. I am one of those kids that has a clear memory of that period. And I remember in her eyes, and I remember it in my mother's, a life not lived. I saw it in my great aunties too, a life not lived. And that's the only way. I couldn't define it as a child. I couldn't define it, but there was something in there that's what resonated to me when I did some really deep work several years ago. I did another deep dive to unpack and find where this trauma was that was creating a bit of an earthquake in my life, because I had a trigger, which happens when you have trauma. Something on the outside hits a trigger. When you're ready, it's going to surface, and it's time for you to be your parent, time for you to be a good steward of yourself, of your life, and make a choice. It's a time for choice. And so I made a choice to look at it and to do some work with my ancestors, to do some work with my grandmother, my aunties who are no longer with us, and look at them and see them again from the eyes I have now, then a few years back. And that statement came to me, a life unlived. And I thought, gosh, why is that? Why? And so many women, it's walked this journey, sacrificed for children, for their husbands, for society, whatever it was. Mothers, women made a choice. And for generations, we put our life, something that we may have, our dream, aside, and we sacrificed, or we hid, or whatever it was that made us make whatever the choice was. And there was something in me that said, no, I have to. But I, like water on a rock, being in that environment, it left a groove. So in my journey, of course, I did that. I did that with my own self. There were parts of my life that were being left unlived. And it was the fear of acknowledging, of sharing my story, because I was afraid that this I was afraid that my agents and the people that I worked with would think, oh my gosh, she's, who is this person?
Like, who wants to work with her? I mean, it's like working with that athlete who never wants to come to practice because he's dealing with so many different issues, but he's good, or she's good, but who wants to work with somebody that nobody else wants to work with? And I'm sure that's, go ahead.
But see, I've been working. So I have this track record, but people hear from their own listening, from their own histories. And when you share something like your trauma, like, oh, she's been through that. When you walk into the room, that is there with you. And when people...
So people already know that. They're looking at your resume and they probably have the cliff notes to decide, she's kind of crazy. She does it. What happened to her and her mother. Her brother does it. What she did the last. So all of that is right there when because I've had to do several auditions. I don't know what they were looking at. They always looked at this paper. I'm like, why do you have that paper and I don't have that? Like, what is on that paper besides the script? So I understand what you're saying, that coming into that space, I feel the same way when I'm doing the work that I do, because my work is highly sensitive. And there's a lot of things that I choose not to put on social media because of the political fight that I would get involved in that will go into a different direction. But I'm humble enough and I'm smart enough to put that under just to get the work done. And not, when I say get the work done, I'm not saying just to get the profit, because I always tell people my work is about the people over the profit. Is to get the work done because the work needs to be done and it's changing lives. But I too know walking a fine line with what people are reading about me, what people are posting, and why I choose not to do that. But I want to go back to something that you said. You said a whole lot of stuff. While you were talking, I was thinking about Kevin Hart, the funny man Kevin Hart from Philadelphia, who was on Oprah Winfrey. And Kevin Hart said to Oprah at this time when he was doing the Super Soul Sundays, he said, people would try to use stuff against me. And so instead of that, I would put it out there first. I know you're going to call me black. I know you're going to call me short. You're going to call me poor. And all those things. And then he said, once you've said those things, now I can get you because you cannot use those things against me. And so it's bold for you to say that I put those things out there because, again, with social media, with all these other things, many people can find them. But some things are somewhat still hidden. And I love that you said, I'm even doing work with my ancestors. Now I want to park right there, put the emergency brakes on right there, and then put the hazard lights on. Because when you said that, I thought about a book by Mark Wolin called It Didn't Start With You.
Isn't that
how inherited family trauma shapes who you are and how you can end the cycle. And when I bring this book up to people, I say it this way. I said, so I have a Cocker Spaniel who's never been around a Cocker Spaniel at all. He doesn't even know. He thinks maybe a pit bull, a German Shepherd is a Cocker Spaniel, but he does exactly what other Cocker Spaniels do. So I have my son who sees a picture. He sees a picture of me. He sees a picture of me. Actually, it's not me. It's an ancestor. It's somebody who hasn't been around for years. He thinks it's me. He argues me down that it's me. It's not me. So I say to people, if my dog can do what other Cocker Spaniels do, if my son and other people can look at an image, you might look at your grandmother's image and you think that was me as a child. If those things manifest in those images, why then can we not inherit some trauma from family members who we don't even know? As Kendrick Lamar says in his hip hop song, I said I was going to come back to hip hop, right? It's in my DNA. That is somewhere down the line. So talk to me about the work that you said that you did around the ancestors, because I don't think people really understand what that actually means.
So what I did, okay, I'll give you a little peek into, I'm writing right now, and my this work is what I call epigenetic propaganda.
I like that. We're going to take that. You better coin that. I'm going to steal it to give it away.
Yeah, it's going to be part of my book. So here's the deal. You're absolutely right. It is in our DNA. It's a behavior that's passed down. And I do think that when you're inside of your mother, I mean, obviously we're made of the DNA of our ancestors, but when you're inside of your mother, whatever she's going through, the way our cells absorb emotion, the way that we are working through issues, we are so much about emotion, so much about reactions and responses, which is choice, right? But we react constantly. We're reacting to the environment around us. So the work that I did is I sat across from my ancestors no longer with us, with them, my grandmother especially, and my great aunties, and my grandfather who killed my grandmother when I was 3.
Wow.
And I spoke with them and I asked them what they wanted, who they were, what they had to say. And what kept coming up inside of me was they wanted to be seen as a child before they became overburdened with their trauma from their youth, from their experience. That's why, and I did this while I was writing my book, that's what discovering yourself through the light of your innocence means, is that each one of us has that in us. And what I recognized in these conversations was that there was a through line with each one was, please see me before I hurt you. Please see me before I was hurt. Please see me before I was hurt. And I think that's what all children have, that we are so drawn to, this love, this innocence, this joy, which is in us. It never goes away. We just, the world around us, the perspectives we have, the language we adopt, the experiences we have starts to create this house of mirrors. And it's up to us to look back in, pull all that away, and see that innocence inside. And that innocence is where expanding comes from. It's where forgiveness lives. It's where we come to the point of recognizing that there really isn't a place to even forgive, because once you get to the point of seeing that we all have been through something, especially now, some trauma, nobody has not been through trauma after what we've all lived through in 2020. There's just nobody exempt from trauma. It is legitimate trauma globally. And at the same time, it's expansion, recognition, connection, joy. Wow, I'm not alone. I have got this whole world. My whole human family is a part of me. I have a responsibility. And that responsibility is where I try and live, is recognizing that I have something and that was why I had that conversation. That's why I did the work with my ancestors. Why I felt I had to speak with them is because it was my responsibility to not just look out here, but to look in here and say, who's impacted me? Okay, look at my DNA. Who's in my DNA? Where have they been? What have they lived through? I can't just deny them, because when you do that, it's like a boomerang. You throw it out there and it comes right back. And it not only hits you, but it nicks everyone around you. And everyone you're in a relationship with ends up feeling the looking out and not coming from the place of responsibility looking in. And I think we're responsible to our ancestors in that way. We're responsible to say, I see you. I saw what you did. I saw what you lived through. Yes, I have pain. My 16-year-old, my 3-year-old, my 5-year-old in me will always need my special care to remind them that you were once them, and they need the love that I have for you in the same way. And I have to give that to them to be able to give that to others wholly, truly, honestly. And that's what I came to several years ago. And then, people started popping in my life. I changed my life, and I changed my direction, and I wanted to put my story out there. And I met some amazing women that encouraged me, like Lisa Nichols.
Well, yeah, Lisa is a great person to be encouraged by. One of the things that you mentioned early on, you talked a little bit about nature. And I was reading an article entitled How Nature Has Grounded Me in the Here and Now During Trauma Recovery. So if trauma and its effects can be summed up by the act of learning to hide from oneself, nature has the opposite effect, says this teacher, Van der Kolk. What does that actually mean to you? You know, he says if trauma and its effects can be summed up as an act of learning to hide from oneself, then for me, nature has the opposite effect of it.
Yes. So I know nature, I know that statement it's beautiful. It's so clear. And nature is what gave me the ability to stay in touch with me and not always hide, because I went out into it and I expressed myself. I had no fear element of nature. So one of the things that I speak about with regard to nature is if you're having trouble with your trauma, whatever you've been through, feeling supported, feeling like they're heard, cared for, step out into nature and lean into a tree. Just give yourself a moment. And I did this all the time as a kid. I would just lean in to a tree. And as long as I can remember, when people ask me, who would you like to meet? Is there any famous person you would like to meet? If you could meet anyone that ever existed that's alive now or in the past to have a conversation with, who would it be? My answer's always been a great sequoia, because I've always felt loved, supported, strength, encouragement, expansion, resilience, grace from the trees and everything from wildlife as well. I never had any fear of things that I should have had fear for as a kid. I would spend 6-8 hours a day by myself out in nature, way out in nature by myself. Mountain lions, rattlesnakes. I had no issues, bobcats, all manner of wild animals around me. No fear ever. I just did not have fear in that world because I felt it loved me. And it was because of my perspective of it, there wasn't a danger experience there.
Yeah, how you saw the world as an innocent person. Now, when you said the person that you want to meet the most, I was just hoping you were going to say me, but you did not. So I'm going to edit that out of the show. But I know that there's another person that you met that you spoke highly of. His name is Nelson Mandela. And can you talk to us about that meeting of Nelson Mandela? He was on my list, my wish list. I talk a lot about Nelson Mandela in my work, and also talk a lot about Bishop Desmond Tutu. In my work, I talk about the concept of Ubuntu. I am because we are. And in one of your interviews, you talked about meeting Nelson Mandela, and you talked about energy. And I'm assuming because, you talk about the energy of these plants and these animals, you somewhat felt some connection to him. Can you share your story about meeting Nelson Mandela?
Absolutely. So I was doing a film in South Africa, and it was a Western with Martin Sheen, who's an activist, as you probably know, and humanitarian. He called me and said, "Hey, I'm going to go meet Nelson Mandela, and if you'd like to come, I'd like you to join me." And I said, "Absolutely, I'd love to meet Nelson Mandela." Wow. Okay. So we left that morning, and it was just, several actors. It was one of my co-stars. It was Martin Sheen, his son, and our amazing driver who was there every day with us. It was just a beautiful person. And we went to his headquarters in Joburg, went upstairs, and walked in, and I remember the energy of this man was pure joy. There was such a pureness. The smile to meet us was like, I just remember he's so excited to meet us. And I am so blown away at this. I couldn't even, I was only 25, I think, at the time. I did not realize what I was in the presence of, but it was impacting. It went right in, just like in nature. So, like, as you said, it was something that just connected on such a deep level. And we talked about, he just wanted to know everything about what we were doing. He wanted to know, he was talking about how I just love actors. I love acting, I probably would be an actor in another life. He had this, just joy, playfulness. And meeting Martin Sheen, he was talking about Apocalypse Now. And it was just, we spent 45 minutes or more with him in his office and just hung out. It was just us and him, just hanging out, talking about where we were, what we were doing, the sets and, our lives. And, he asked about, what in my life, and I was married at the time. I had stepkids that I was parenting, and I showed him some pictures, and he, he spoke about his family, and he spoke about what he was trying to do in Africa. He gave us a little bit about what he was trying to do and how he was trying to unite the tribes together, how he was trying to create peace, not just between the Boers, the Caucasians, the white people, and the Africans, the tribes together. There was a lot that he was working through. There was so much he was dealing with. He was, his ability to smile into your heart, because his smile came from his heart. It just came from there.
Yeah, I love how you reminiscing with his story and watching you light up. I just read Will Smith's book, Will. And of course, he worked in Africa doing the film about Muhammad Ali. And he was in South Africa and he met Nelson Mandela one time. And Nelson Mandela kept saying to him, I'm an old man. I'm an old man. And he was basically saying, you need to come sit with me. You need to come sit with me. And you hear old griot say that. And Will Smith said that he said that he doesn't have any regrets in his life, but this is at the top of the list. He said he really wanted to spend time with him, but he said, Will said, I think I was afraid. I was afraid. It was like he could see straight through me. And he would always say to me, this is Nelson Mandela saying, I'm an old man. I'm not going to be around that long. And when I read Will Smith's books, it reminded me of everything that you said. He said he felt like he was the only one in the room. And in South Africa, there's a greetings that says, Sawubona, I see you. And that's where that concept comes from. And you're saying that you're visible, that you're there. And especially with someone you like, I'm this woman from America. He might not know my roles, or he might know Martin Sheen, a couple of things. But regardless of those roles, we were there and we were present. And that's what I think that this work that you're doing that is really about, because you have an amazing list of accolades from acting, but to watch you just glow up, talking not only just about him, but talking about nature, even talking about the traumas that you had to overcome and the impact that they've had on your life. And so I appreciate that energy. But I have another question as it relates to that. How did unpacking your destructive family legacies help you to choose a different path? Because many of us, as you said, we run from our legacy. We run from the alcoholism or the abuse, or we run from the abandonment issue. How did unpacking your destructive family legacy help you to choose a different path?
I'm sorry, I just had like a technical thing. My screen just came up, so I just eliminated it. So I'm just going to connect this to Nelson, because it's beautiful that you just asked that question. For the longest time, well, when we're hurt, when we're traumatized, we get hurt. We cover it with anger often. The anger is a defense to protect the wound. It's the Band-Aid that the human mind puts on. Often it's either drugs, alcohol, anger, protection. Hard to forgive when you're in that space of anger. Really hard to forgive, really hard to let go of the pain and see clearly that there is no one exempt from pain, that we are all the same. When I left that meeting with Nelson, I suddenly began to weep deeply in the car. And I had no idea why. No idea why. Why am I weeping? Because the level of forgiveness, the level of compassion, the level of grace this man walked in after living through what he lived through was a resonant experience to my heart of what I wanted. I wanted to feel that light, that joyous, that peaceful, that willing to do whatever I could to bring people together that he was. He spent 28 years in a box and came out filled with joy, filled with service, filled with grace. And that hit me in the most beautiful way. It just opened my heart. And that's why I wept. And Martin reached back and touched me and said, because I was like, I'm so sorry, guys. I don't know what's happening. I'm so sorry. My 24-year-old, 25-year-old was just like, oh my God, this is, what's happening? And he said, it's okay. That's what happens when you meet somebody with that level of grace, with that level of forgiveness. It just impacts you. And it's beautiful that you're impacted this way, that his energy went straight to your core. That is why I've been on the path. I've been on the path to the degree that I've been on the path, is not just because of my desire to choose myself as a child and leave, rather than, and recognition that if I stay, this is going to be harder for me. If I stay, it's knowing that I was going to have difficulty moving forward and being who I wanted to be. I needed a reprieve. So I ran. I started running away when I was 13. And finally, like you said, when I was 15. I always wanted to do and be an expression of God's love. Somehow, some way, what's my purpose? What am I supposed to do here? Why am I here? Well, you're here as a member of this family. You're here to show that no matter what you've been through, there's always room for love. There's always room for compassion. There's always room for grace. And in the midst of suppressing and pushing down and trying to live into what, the success my agents were pushing me toward, because I was not wanting to let my trauma show, because here I was, all these great opportunities. I could not lose myself now. I could not go into trauma, and I cannot lose my ground now. I met this person, this beautiful soul that reminded me, you are just exactly the way you're supposed to be. Keep looking inside, keep expanding, keep remembering that you are joy. Remember before you decided what it was that happened to you, what it was defined as. Find another definition, find another perspective. That's what he, to me, represented. Somebody who looked at the very people that hurt him the most and loved them and served them. And that's why I did the work I did with my ancestors. That's why I did the work I did with my parents, my mother and my stepdad, my biological. It's, how can I be angry at them? How can any of us, if we're going to look at, people like Nelson that have walked this life, we can all look to Christ and say, wow, I will do my best. Nelson gives us such a clear path of showing, hang on a minute. Let me show you what it means to be in grace, compassion, to choose kindness, and to choose service.
And to choose forgiveness, as you said. Who else? And it's a beautiful story. There's another famous person who had a very similar aha moment. Now, She wasn't with Martin Sheen over there shooting a movie, but she is Hillary Rodham Clinton. And she shared a very similar story when she visited Nelson Mandela. And she was going through what she was going through with Bill Clinton at the time. And she said, he grabbed her hand and said to her, you need to forgive so you can move on, that there's something greater than what he did or what he thought he was doing to hurt you. And so she said exactly what you said. And so, I appreciate that story that you shared with us. And I appreciate you using your life as a living sacrifice of not only just your body of work, but showing the other side of what acting and being someone in Hollywood can be about. Because quite often we get caught up in the accolades of what Hollywood is. And we know, most people I know, because I've gotten a taste of it, most people don't want what it is once they're there. And most people that aren't grounded, they sort of then fall for what they fall victim of what Hollywood has to offer for them. But I hear a level of groundedness in you. Now, before you leave, I want my listeners to continue the conversation with you, because I can talk to you forever. I want them to know how they can get in contact with you. How can they get a copy of your book? And then what is your goal with the book? Why did you write this book when you could have been writing a script or a screenplay? I mean, this could be a part of that. So how can they get in contact with you? What is your goal with writing the book Awaken? Or what was your goal?
They can get in contact with me at walkerbrandt.com, my website, my social media. I'm on Instagram, Facebook. I'd love to hear from you. I would just love to hear from anyone. Reach out, open a conversation. I'm here. I wrote my book because I wanted to share my story, and I wanted to do it in a way that it was the right time. It was a time when I could tell it, as Lisa says, with the people that hurt me the most, sitting in the front row with their dignity intact, because I was standing on my story. I love that she says that. Are you standing on your story? Are you in your story? Can you tell it with those people sitting in front of you, loving them through it? Would they be able to nod their head? Would they be able to shed a tear with you and a smile with you? That is exactly why I wrote it. When I wrote it, I was ready. And I wrote it to let people know things aren't always what they seem. Like you said about Hollywood, things aren't always what they seem. And that is the blessing. That is the blessing. Let us see each other in a way that is filled with an acknowledgement that we are all so much alike in so many ways, and that we can all give to each other, receive from each other, and in doing that, accept each other in all of our uniqueness and differences, and at the same time, own our unique reason to be here and celebrate it, and not be burdened by what we think might be a burden. I wrote it to say, I'm okay with me. I'm okay with what has happened in my family. I wish it didn't, but it's my responsibility to say, I can live this walk. And if I can and fall down and still be successful and create what I created, you can too. You can. You just have to open your eyes and look in a different way. And if you need somebody to say, this is how I looked, this is what I chose, to encourage you, that to let you know how to see that in you, what you really, your true sight that comes from the light inside of you. That is what this book is about.
All right. So Walker, I know you have this book out, so I'm sure you're getting a lot of calls from that, but what are some other projects that you're working on right now that other people can follow you in other areas?
Well, I work with Lisa Nichols in one of her courses called Ignite Your Speaking.
And if you don't know who Lisa Nichols is, you've been hiding under a rock. Go out and Google her, but keep going.
Yes, I'm a coach in one of her courses, which is
Wow.
fantastic. And we help speakers develop their story, develop their speaking identity and techniques. She has amazing techniques, and I highly recommend working with her if you can. It's so much fun, and I would love to coach anyone that ends up in that, because it's just such a blessing to expand with that incredible group of human beings sharing their voice in the world. I also work with an organization called Blue Ribbons Worldwide. I've been teaching a course with Grandma Sparky, who created the Who I Am Makes a Difference Blue Ribbon. She's impacted over 50 million people, and we created a virtual course, and it's a leadership and community building training. It's a 6-week virtual course. So I teach that, and she teaches it, and we do it together. Sometimes we do it individually, and I'm an ambassador for her company. And so I'm also writing another book, and I've almost finished a screenplay. I've had many on the burner, and it's kind of, writing has been my private little space. But in 2020, I kind of blew the lid off of that. So yes, I've got lots of new things going on. I have a lot of things.
Any acting projects coming up, or
commercial? I always sign NDAs. I cannot say anything until they roll out, but I still work on commercials and advertising. That's where I focus, so that I have time with my family. I stopped working on film and TV, or at least putting my energy to it. If the right project comes along, I will, and I can put my time to it. But I've been focusing on my family, and advertising and commercials makes that really easy to do. I lived out of a suitcase for so long and was gone 6-8 months out of the year that it was really challenging to have a healthy family life.
Oh, I know. How do the children respond when they see some new commercials, or maybe some old ads, or some of the films that you were a part of?
Most of the time is, I didn't know you did that. Why didn't you tell me you did that? Because I don't talk about it. I just don't. And that's what I hear most is, why didn't you tell me you had that spot coming out? I didn't know you did that campaign. You were in that movie? Oh yeah, I just don't, because I go from one thing to the next, and I just, I'm just an adventurer in this experience.
You've been on studio sets, from TV to film. Can you give us some behind the scenes things that takes place that people don't even imagine that takes place, maybe in a studio or on a film set, production set, things that the average person may not even think of that goes on behind the scenes?
Things that go on behind the scenes. Lots of practical jokes. Actors love playing jokes on each other. That's, you hear about some actors doing it, but it's like a constant. I think actors a lot more levity behind the scenes than people imagine, because you think that it's so serious, but and it is, it's a big gig, there's a lot of money in it, and there's pressure, but there's a lot more levity going on behind scenes than you expect. And if you go in knowing that, it gives you an edge. If you go in ready to be a part of the fun of it, to play in any creative environment, especially in film and TV, that is what's going to give you, I think, an edge. And that's definitely something that goes on behind the scenes. Another thing is just people, there's a lot of sharing from history. Like when I was on Star Trek, one of the things that was incredible for me was I got to go behind, not behind, but it is a behind the scenes thing. I got to go into the archives from the original Star Trek. Wow. All the alien costuming, all of the prosthetics. I got to go into that museum. And that was an incredible experience. The history there, because I grew up with Star Trek. My mother was, she's pretty much a Trekkie. And she's a sci-fi junkie. So there's, that, as far as behind the scenes stuff, that's an opportunity that goes on.
To learn some cool things. So I see that you're very well grounded. And I'm sure you somewhat shifted from being a young actress to a more seasoned actress. Is there anything that you do different from when you were younger to now more seasoned as you prepare for a role? Are there any rituals that you do? I've been on several sets working as a teacher, not as an acting teacher, but as a teacher to some of the young people who had to have a teacher on the set. So I get a chance to see some of those things. But what are some things that you do to prepare for a role?
Well, depending on what the role is. If it's a commercial, obviously, always have your dialogue and everything that that's expected of you locked in. Do your background work. What do you want? What are they asking for from you? Know the product. Do the research. Look at past campaigns. Don't think that's what they want because they're going for something different, but know what they tend to like. Have all of that in your arsenal, your actor arsenal, and then show up and leave that all behind and let every moment the director and you are connecting with within that story be what it is in that moment. There is a statement: work hard, practice hard, and forget it all. When you're on set, forget it all, because you can't be present in the moment thinking about what you think you know they want or of the story. Listen and trust that you're there because they want who you are. So be you in that moment and listen to what's going on and let that inform you, not what you think you should be doing and you should know and be bringing. That's so important, to just be present, be prepared, and then just play. That's what I do more now. That's what I did at the very beginning, which is what catapulted me. Then I started hearing, you should study with this person. You need this. You haven't had any training. You got to go here. Well, you should do this and you should do that. And then it was like, oh, okay. Then you start feeling like, oh my gosh, especially if you're somebody who loves to learn. Oh, well, I should learn that. I should learn this. I should take this on. Then you start speaking to yourself in a way of often judgment, or I gotta make sure I have this. No, the most important thing always, like Uta Hagen says, a well-crafted actor ought to be one of the most well-adjusted people that you meet. And the reason is because you understand that there's all this wonderful and intricate preparation and the desires of us humans, what we want, what motivates us, the stakes that we create. But what you recognize and learn from studying that and creating that is the most important of all.
I could talk to you forever, but I'm not going to do that because I want other people to go out and get the book. Because again, I see why Awaken was the Amazon #1 book. So it's an amazing book to pick up. So I encourage you to do that. The second part of the show is called the Super Bomb Questions, Walker. They're different from the first part. This time I need you to answer the question as quickly as possible. No commentary. When I ask the question, respond to it as the first thing that comes to your head. Are you ready?
Yes.
All right, here we go. What's your favorite word?
Joy.
What's your favorite quote? Or a verse or a lyric to a song?
Favorite quote? Be you.
What's your superpower?
My imagination.
What's your spirit animal?
Gosh, there's so many. Spirit animal. Probably a hummingbird.
What moves you to tears of joy?
Laughter of children and laughter of just innocence. Seeing it in action.
Seeing it in action. What moves you to tears of sorrow?
Lack of compassion.
What do you wish you had more time to do?
Oh gosh, what do I wish I had more time to do? I just love doing this. I love I always have time to do, though. That's a hard question. What do I wish I had more time to do? Probably just be in love in nature and just talk to God. I love that. I love. Just
I do too. I could do the same thing all day long. What advice are you glad that you ignored?
You can't do it. Nobody's going to understand who you are and what you're not smart.
What's a ritual you do that helps you connect to your inner power?
I look at myself. I just look inside myself every morning. I wake up inside saying, I'm so thankful. Thank you for this life. Thank you for this joy. Thank you for this love. Thank you for answering. Thank you for giving me the ears, the eyes, and the nose, and the will to ask.
What do you know for sure?
That if you ask knowing in thankfulness, watch out. It's coming.
Final question. If you were in the Mrs. America talent competition, Walker Brandt, what would your talent be?
She knows how to love. That's what I want my talent to be. She makes me feel joy. She makes me smile. She makes me feel loved.
I love it. That is a great way to wrap up the show. Listen, Walker Brandt, the amazing Walker Brandt, actor, teacher, author, educator, best smile of anybody that's coming to the studio. I want to thank you for joining me today. It's been a pleasure hanging out with you today.
Oh, it's been such a pleasure. Wow. I can't even express how much fun this has been. I cannot wait.
You're making me blush over here. And listen, I cannot do this without my producer, Carrie Mattia, my engineer, Alexander Blanc. But listen, we can't do it without all of you. Listen, we want you to subscribe. Stop being stingy. We're on every platform. If you want to know more about me, you can go to drlds.com. Check out the things that I'm doing. But listen, I want you to go out and do something for someone other than yourself today. You have been listening to Soundbalming. Peace.